In this movie, we will follow the journey of four friends who have a book containing their childhood dreams. 8 years later, they have grown into teenagers and got accepted into prestigious colleges. However, they face a bitter reality as they feel excluded from the graduation party because they are not popular enough in high school. Before starting college, they all worked part-time jobs. Andy became a tennis instructor and dreamt of meeting his pen pal friend from India. Nora worked as a science researcher and fell in love with her co-worker from Australia. Lionel became an MMA instructor, while Spice worked as a cook at a restaurant. One day, Lionel received an invitation from his cousin to attend a party at The Point, a luxurious residential community. He shared this news with his friends, and they were thrilled because the party presented an opportunity to fulfill their long-held dreams. At the Point party, this group immediately became the center of attention due to their unique talents. Andy wowed the guests with his ability to catch food in his mouth, while Lionel drunkenly taught Tai Chi. Finally, Andy fulfilled his desire to have his first experience. A beautiful woman was captivated by his talent and invited him to catch something else. Meanwhile, Spice, although successful in catching the attention of a lovely girl, failed to achieve his goal due to being too hasty. Elsewhere, Nora encountered Erland, her older lab colleague. They shared intimate moments, kissed, and promised to meet again. The next day, the group gathered again and shared their experiences. Andy expressed his disapproval of Nora's relationship with Erland due to the significant age difference. Spice felt disappointed for not achieving his desires yet, but they all were excited because they were invited to 2 parties by wealthy girls. The scene switches to Andy, who is coaching tennis for wealthy women. One of his clients, Gabby, invites him for a private lesson. However, the private lesson turns out to be different from what Andy had imagined. When he arrives at Gabby's house, he is immediately greeted with a kiss, and they engage in intimacy 5 times over the course of 3 hours. Andy is paid $150 per hour for this private lesson. At the next party, Andy expresses his jealousy over Nora and Erland's relationship to Spice. He also reveals that he is now giving private lessons to wealthy women and sleeping with them. Spice feels envious, but reminds Andy to be cautious because eventually those affairs will always be exposed. After the party, Andy resumes his role as a tennis instructor for wealthy women. Gabby spreads information about Andy's private lessons to her acquaintances. As a result, Andy becomes involved in intimate relationships with many of his clients residing in The Point. He sends the money he earns to his pen pal in India. In the next scene, they are playing mini-golf when they encounter their former high school friends, Conch and Rock, who greet them with mockery. After Conch and Rock leave, Andy immediately expresses his opinion to Nora, stating his disapproval of her relationship with Erland due to their significant age difference. Nora feels offended and believes that Andy is interfering too much in her personal affairs. She leaves first and waits in the car. Spice disagrees with Andy's way of thinking, considering that Andy himself engages in relationships with much older women for financial gain. The atmosphere in the car becomes awkward, as everyone remains silent and they all head straight to their respective homes. Afterward, Andy contacts his pen pal Danya and sends $2,000 to cover Danya's travel expenses to America. Meanwhile, Nora visits Erland's house and decides to sleep with him for the first time. In the next scene, Andy is caught red-handed being intimate with Gabby. He is forced to flee without his clothes when Gabby's husband returns home earlier than expected. Unfortunately, Andy gets arrested by the police, but is later released after assisting the officers in resolving a suspicious mortgage purchase. However, the problems with this group continue. Lion experimented with hard drugs and got fired after experiencing hallucinations in class. The senior tennis coach revealed to Andy that they also slept with Gabby, but not as foolishly as Andy, who got caught. They threatened to fire Andy if he didn't stop his private lessons. Andy was finally fired after being seen flirting with female students in the place. Meanwhile, Nora found out that Erland was just playing with her and decided to end their relationship. And Spice hasn't had any major issues in her life recently. After getting fired, Andy received a message from a client offering $1,000 for an hour. Drunk, Andy tried to meet the client, but ended up entering the wrong house and met Conk, who was babysitting. Conk revealed that nobody hated Andy or his group in high school. The party that Andy claimed they weren't invited to actually didn't invite anyone, and they just showed up on their own. Conch added that it was Andy and his group who distanced themselves. As a formality, Conch invited Andy to be an honored guest at the end of summer party, and they became friends. Meanwhile, a group of husbands whose partners had a romantic history with Andy gathered to identify and discuss the actions they would take against him. At the same time, Andy and his friends were considering an invitation to a social event hosted by Conch. Shortly after, Andy's online lover, Danya, arrived in the United States. Andy, Lion, and Nora went to pick up Danya at the airport, and Danya immediately showed affection towards Andy. Andy and Danya checked into a hotel, but Andy suddenly experienced discomfort while urinating. The burning sensation prompted him to leave Danya and seek medical help. Andy visited a clinic and was diagnosed with a fungal infection. Fortunately, the condition was detected early. Andy was prescribed medication for a week, which required him to avoid intimate contact. Unbeknownst to Andy, the lack of physical intimacy between him and Danya created an impression that he was not interested in her. The scene transitions to a summer party attended by the group, including Danya. They are warmly welcomed by their former classmates. As Andy and his friends have just arrived, Rock challenges Andy to a strength competition as a form of acceptance. Meanwhile, Danya observes that Andy and Nora seem to have a romantic interest in each other. Meanwhile, Lion, who noticed Danya, approached her, and she revealed that Andy had never had any physical contact with her. Lion tried to console Danya and managed to persuade her to engage in an intimate moment in a secluded corner. Meanwhile, Spice successfully convinced a woman to rub a banana against him, and in return, Spice had to please the woman using his mouth. However, the party atmosphere suddenly became tense when the group of husbands looking for Andy arrived at the venue. Panicking, Andy professed his love to Nora, thinking that he might die that day. But just in time, Lion arrived and used his self-defense skills to defeat the husbands single-handedly. The commotion caught the attention of two police officers who arrived to disperse the party. However, one of the officers recognized Andy as the person who had assisted him with a mortgage application. The officers decided not to take any action and offered the group a ride home instead. The party guests cheered and resumed their festivities. As the summer came to an end, the group bid a sad farewell, reflecting on the incredible summer they had. Lion and Danya, after a passionate week-long relationship, promised to meet during the semester break, as Danya would be studying at UCLA. Meanwhile, Nora expressed her love to Andy, and they passionately kissed and embraced. They all then departed for their respective campuses. Andy then joined the induction line at Dartmouth. He seemed popular when he was called by one of the pretty girls while throwing gum, which Andy skillfully caught with his mouth. Confidently, Andy introduced himself to other students in the induction line, and the movie ended.